When it comes to watercolor, there are so many different options for materials, but in this video today, I'm going to simplify all of that and show you what I use on a daily basis and other options if you're looking for student grade supplies. So let's start with paint. I have three different types of paints that I use. I use a professional grade paint by Winsor and Newton. I also use handmade paints by Sparrow and my student grade paints by Rowny. So my Winsor and Newton paints come in tubes. I put them in my ceramic palette. You can also get Winsor and Newton Cotman, which is the student grade brand of paints, and do the same thing. Letter Sparrow is run by this amazing woman named Kelly. She's the nicest, and her handmade paints are incredible. I love supporting small businesses too, so I have really fallen in love with these paints. I was given this Daler and Rowny set to try out, and I actually really fell in love with these paints. They're student grade, but I love that the trays pop out to give you more areas for mixing, and then the little paint pans actually pop out as well. So this has been really helpful for me when I'm painting my Patreon videos because I can use very specific colors so people can follow along, and I love that there is writing on the side of the pans so I never actually forget which color I'm using since there are so many. This Daler Rowny brand also has smaller sets available. We're going to compare the three different types of paint in a minute, but first let's talk about paper. If you know me, you know my favorite paper is Arch. You might call it Arches or Arch or whatever you call it. It's amazing. We love it. I buy it in these more affordable pads that are not blocks, 12 sheets for about $18. So still pricey, but I found this amazing paper called Baohong, and it comes in a glued pad that you can, paint landscapes and it won't warp. And it is very similar to the texture of Arche, but way more affordable. So we're going to compare Arche and Baohong with also the different paints. So first I'm using Letter Sparrow. This blue, oh my gosh, I am so in love with that blue. And you can see how it reacts the same way on both pieces of paper. Now we're going to do the Winsor Newton in a deep yellow color. I love my Winsor Newton paints. They are very creamy and very nice, and they seem to be reacting the same on both types of paper. And then this is my Daler Rowny set of paints. And when you're using the Daler Rowny, they're so pigmented and creamy as well, but you can tell they dry a little bit lighter, but they are reacting the same way with water on both of these types of paper. So overall, very impressed with the Baohong. Now on to brushes. I keep my brushes very simple. I mostly use my Polina Bright round brush. You can see the name is even worn off. It's the top one, and the mop brush. They're really stiff and springy, and I just really love working with them. My second favorite type of brush are the Princeton brushes, the flat brush, their typical round brushes, and an angular brush. And that's really all I use. I keep my brushes very simple. I feel like I can get a whole lot done with very few brushes. I don't think brushes are a place where you have to go very expensive. I know Polina's brushes are on the pricier end, but I just, you love what you love, and I love Polina's brushes. So the top one is her round brush size 0, and this one is her mop size 2. And I just feel like they can be used for so many different things because the point stays pointy and it holds so much paint and water, and they're super springy. So anyway, major love for those two. I have a discount code in the description below. And then I really enjoy using Princeton's brushes as well. They're more the typical brush, the typical size. And sometimes you just want a smaller brush to do really thin details, which is why I use that smaller round brush in the green. And then I really love using my angular brush for leaves or circular shapes. I used it for clouds on a card the other day. I really, really like this brush. People get really excited about brushes because there are so many different brushes that can do different things. But I think if you know your brush and you practice mark making, your brushes can surprise you on the types of marks that they can make. So this is a flat brush, and you can use it in so many different ways. I can use it on the edge to make really thin straight lines. I can make a big circle. I can make smaller washes and bigger washes. So again, know your brushes, They might surprise you of the different marks they can make. And the last one is a Princeton size 8 round brush. This is a very typical and common, really nice round brush to have, so I recommend everybody have something similar. So again, I have a Polina round size 0, a Polina mop size 2, a round size 4, an angular, a flat, and a Princeton round size 8. Those bottom 4 are all Princeton. I also always use a pencil and an X-Acto knife. I have the X-Acto knife if I have some watercolor that I don't want on my paper. Because I have really nice watercolor paper, I like to use it to scratch the surface to take the paint away. Now, there are lots of different methods, but this is my favorite because I feel like it does the least amount of damage to the paper. And then after I do the scratching, I use an eraser, and it is perfect in my opinion. Another material I use on a weekly basis is table salt. So this is just regular kosher salt, and all you need to do is use a medium type mixture of pigment and water, and while it's still wet, immediately sprinkle salt. And I've put in a little time lapse for you so you can see how the salt takes the pigment in and creates these beautiful blooms and texture on the paper. So we're going to let that dry while we talk about masking fluid. So this is my very well loved Winsor and Newton masking fluid that you use with a brush, and this is my newer masking fluid that's more like a fine-tipped pen. So I've been really enjoying doing more detail work with this type of masking fluid. You can see it's very easy to get very thin and detailed lines. So I can create shapes, I can create kind of the inside of a leaf, and then paint around that once it dries. So that's the key with masking fluid, is it needs to completely dry. With this other masking fluid, you need to use an old brush, get it a little bit soapy in the bristles, and then you can paint it on. So I use this for large areas, or for details I want to look kind of brushy and wispy, like more of a watercolor effect. But again, everything needs to completely dry before you can paint over the top of it. The point of masking fluid is that you're protecting the paper underneath. And masking tape works the same way. I use it every day to mask off areas of my paper, usually when I'm painting landscapes, to mask off the edges to get nice, clean, crisp lines. And I've never had a problem using regular masking tape, but every time I post about it online, people comment that I shouldn't use masking tape because it rips the paper. So maybe I have really high quality paper, or I'm completely waiting for it to dry, but I have never had an issue with it ripping. And we need to wait for the paint to completely dry before we can remove the salt. But once we remove it, we can see those beautiful blooms and textures. I love using that for like a snowy effect. And now that all the areas of masking fluid have dried, we can paint over them. So you want to make sure your masking fluid has completely dried, or it's just going to mix together with the paint, which will be awful. And then you can paint anything you want over the top. You can even let your paint dry, and then put masking fluid on top to save a lighter color of paint. So masking fluid is one of my must-haves. I absolutely love it. There's so many different uses for it. So these just always look really cool when you do the big masking fluid reveal, especially this little leaf that has the tiny little veins in it. So you might have heard, but we are doing a watercolor workshop in Croatia in September. If you can come, that would be awesome, but it's focused on plein air painting. So something I've been using a lot recently is my tiny watercolor travel kit that has all of these different elements. This handcuff is like the paper towel. You dab your watercolor brush on it. And this is my notebook from Just Journal It. Oh my gosh, Ginger makes the most beautiful notebook, and she makes them with Arche paper. And this is the one I took to Costa Rica when we did our last watercolor workshop. And I cannot wait to take another one of her beautiful watercolor journals and paint in Croatia with you. So this is the whole setup when I'm outside doing my thing with one of my brushes. And while we're talking about Ginger's notebooks, I wanted to show you this smaller one that she sent me. And then she sent me an even tinier one. So now I've got these 3 different sizes, and I just need to find tiny things to paint in it, obviously. I'll put the links for Ginger's notebooks and all of the other things I've mentioned in my description below. So in my last video, I mentioned these 2 flower books by Michael Putnam. This is Flower Color Guide, and I love this book. I mean, I use it for references for flowers all the time. And then flower color theory, I am newly obsessed with because of the bouquets that it shows and the different color combination ideas it can give you. So I use these as a reference all the time when I'm painting flowers. So those are the materials that I use on a daily basis. So it might seem like a lot, but I promise this is pretty simplified, and I wanted to give you different directions you could go in based on your level and affordability, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.